Good evening. For those of you who have not yet met, my name is Melissa Giller. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for the Reagan Foundation and Institute. Thank you for joining us this evening. In honor of our men and women around the world who defend our freedom, if I could ask for you to please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Young Ronald Reagan was a Democrat. Well into his 30s, he still believed that government growth was the solution to many of our problems. His ideologies began to change, however, spurred in part by his tours across the country with General Electric, where he learned firsthand how the government operated and how its decisions affected people all across America. Ronald Reagan realized that no government had ever voluntarily reduced itself in size, and that our Constitution begins with we the people, that we should be telling the government what to do and not the other way around. It was in the fall of 1962, while making a campaign speech as a Democrat for Nixon, that someone interrupted his speech and asked him if he had registered yet as a Republican. When he said no, a woman came down the aisle, told him she was a registrar, and in front of the entire audience, Ronald Reagan officially joined the Republican Party. Now, I can't tell you the date that our speaker here officially joined any political party, but I can share with you that he cast his first Republican ballot in November of '84 for Ronald Reagan. He even co-wrote a cover story for the Sunday magazine of the Washington Post entitled Lefties for Reagan. He has since gone on to write and co-write many best-selling books and pamphlets, and in 1988 created the Center for the Study of Popular Culture, which in 2006 was renamed the David Horowitz Freedom Center. Its mission is dedicated to the defense of free societies whose moral, cultural, and economic foundations are under attack by enemies, both secular and religious, both abroad and at home. He's here tonight to share his thoughts on how President Trump and the GOP need to lay out their agenda and how to claim ultimate victory for the conservative cause. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Horowitz.
Thank you. It's great to be among friends. That article that Peter Collier and I wrote for the Washington Post, our title was Better Ron Than Red. This is the first time I just realized the last time I was here at the library was to come see my friend Mike Pence and to wish him well in the campaign ahead. Look how that turned out. This library, and of course, has always been a special place for me. I've been here many times, beginning with the opening day when there were 5 living presidents present. This man is very special to me. It is true that my first conservative act was to vote for Ronald Reagan. And I have 10 years ago, my wife and I moved into this neighborhood. I met Ronald Reagan once. I had organized with Peter a Second Thoughts conference for ex-radicals, for people who had left the left. And a few years later, I was given a Teach Freedom Award by an organization. And the tradition of this award was that the previous winner would pass the award to the next person. And the previous winner was Ronald Reagan. So I went up. This was when he was retired, and in the Die Hard building out there in Century City was his offices. And while I was waiting, I was very nervous. I kind of felt I was thrust on him, and he wouldn't know who I was. And I was trying to think how in 2 minutes, when he came in, I could explain to him why I was here and why I admired him as I did. And he came in with that wonderful smile he has, and he put his hand out and he said, "I was a second thoughter before you." A sacred political right in our democracy is what's called the presidential honeymoon. According to the Gallup organization, this normally takes an average of 7 months. And what it is it's a celebration of the peaceful, what's really a ritual to make possible the peaceful transition of power. That campaigns, we understand, are very divisive, and people say harsh things. So the honeymoon, the function of the honeymoon, is to remind us that we're one community as Americans, and that we bury our differences for a while and then work, we compromise and we try to work together. So a president gets this honeymoon so he can get in office, so he can assemble his team, get them confirmed, and then he can begin his agenda before the political attacks start. Of course, Donald Trump didn't get 7 seconds, and he didn't get confirmation hearing. What he got was a witch hunt. And I took this quite personally because I've known Jeff Sessions, for example, to pick out one of their targets, for 20 years. Jeff Sessions is one of the most decent human beings in the United States Senate. And also, if you look at his career, he's aptly described as a champion of civil rights. He was the Attorney General in a Deep South state. He prosecuted the Ku Klux Klan. He desegregated the schools. And yet, Democrat after Democrat, beginning with the reprehensible Chuck Schumer, attacks him as a racist. And these are people who knew him for 20 years and knew very well that he wasn't a racist. This is how low the Democratic Party has sunk, and how vicious the political atmosphere has begun. There was a seminal moment in the campaign, which I think, and where Trump illuminated this problem. It was in the second debate, and he turned to the television audience and he said, "You have to understand, Hillary has tremendous hatred in her heart." And I know that word hatred grates on conservatives. Conservatives are very civilized people, as I've discovered after attacking them for so many years. Very civilized and proper and polite. And I have to say, it's become too polite. I often think that as a former radical, I've been sent to conservatives to teach them bad manners. But what Trump was referring to was Hillary's comment that all of us, everybody who disagrees with her really, belongs in a basket of deplorables. And then she named them: racists, sexists, homophobes, Islamophobes, xenophobes, you name it, she said, and accused Trump of raising their lifting them up. Well, anybody in this room who's been in an argument with a so-called liberal will probably have been called a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, or an Islamophobe. The Democratic Party is a party of hate. That's what they do: character assassination, name-calling. That's their politics. Very tragic for our country. I keep waiting, but I've been waiting a very, very long time for actual liberals on the left. I believe conservatives are generally liberal people in the good sense: tolerant, ecumenical, looking to work with people. I think, I would say Alan Dershowitz is such a liberal, but he's pretty isolated. Kirsten Powers might be one too, but they're so few and far between, and they don't stand up in the Congress. You don't see. I can't identify them. You have to ask yourself, why is this the case? Why are Democrats so filled with hate? And it takes somebody brought up by communist parents who never referred to themselves as communists, but only as progressives, to understand the progressive mentality and why this is so. And what it is it's a crypto-religion. It's modeled, their mentality is actually modeled on Christianity. The world is a fallen place, but they never use they would never use those words, a fallen place, because if you use those words, you understand that society isn't the problem, we are, right? I mean, that's what the fall is about. And they see themselves as social redeemers. That is, if you are a religious person, you understand. If you don't even have to be a religious person, just take seriously the story of Genesis, where you see that human beings were given a paradise better than social justice. Nobody died, there was no pain, the fruit fell from the trees. But the condition of living in that paradise was you can't taste of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And people are prone to evil. I mean, that's just the reality. We have to deal, somebody said, in every generation we have to deal with a barbarian threat in our own children. And that's why we have morality. That's why we have religion. That's why we have laws to keep people on the straight path, to humanize them, something that nobody on the left understands. So leftists, progressives, all of them, somewhere, I mean, there are degrees, of course, but they believe fundamentally that they can, if they get enough power, if they can tax you enough, if they can get around the constitutional restrictions enough, they can redeem the world, save the planet. I mean, there's one version of this, which is the environmental alarmism. I mean, Trump, what did he do? He cut a third of the EPA budget, and the headline in the... Oh, you guys are so deplorable. He cut a third of the EPA budget, and the Washington Post had a headline, "Trump dooms the planet." But that's a mentality. If you're saving the planet, if you're redeeming the world, what lie won't you tell? What crime would you not commit or support to create a paradise, which is what they think they're doing, to save the planet, to end racism, sexism, homophobia, war, poverty? That's their mentality. They see themselves as the army of the saints, and they see us as the party of the devil. And when you hear a Democrat, because it's all interchangeable, the Democratic Party is the party of Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders would have been the nominee if the crooked Clintons hadn't fixed the primaries with the help of Donna Brazile and Debbie Wasserman Schultz. That's the reality. And who is Bernie Sanders? He's a lifelong communist. He chose to have his honeymoon in Moscow. What is it, in the Brezhnev era? I mean, such a dummy. However, he is the Democratic Party. This guy Perez, Keith Ellison, they're even worse than he is. That's what the Democratic Party has become. And the sooner conservatives understand that, the better off we are. I think Obama has taught a lot of conservatives how evil the forces against us are. I used to say, whenever I see a Republican square off with a Democrat, it looks to me like Godzilla versus Bambi. Because The Democrat is calling the Republican a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, or an Islamophobe. And the Republican is calling the Democrat a liberal. And I see it all the time. I mean, commentators I really like, and I just saw it today, Neil Cavuto, referring to them as liberals. What are they liberal about except sex, hard drugs, coddling criminals, appeasing our enemies, spending other people's money? But where it counts in the interhuman relationships, they're bigots. They're intolerant beyond belief. They can't disagree with you. They have to defame you and demonize you. Whenever you see a Democrat open his or her mouth, it's like a hellfire and damnation preacher. And, I've tried over the years. I mean, I've banged my head against the conservative temperament over so many years, trying to get Republicans to do moral indictments of the Democrats. It's the only way you can actually counter them, is by, as I call it, fighting fire with fire, throw it in their faces. I'll get to that. But before I do that, I want to explain why we are in what I call a civil war situation. This is really what's happened. We don't have a community anymore. You can't have a community with, Chuck Schumer is just a shameless liar. And what do these people believe? How could Cory Booker throw Jeff Sessions under the bus like that? But there's not one who stood up and said, this is wrong. And give this example from the campaign. Trump was caught on tape with Billy Bush saying stupid things, stupid, crude boasting, when they thought nobody was looking. That was the sin, okay? Republican after Republican, major figures. Paul Ryan, and Mitt Romney. This is a bridge too far. We can't support the Republican candidate, even though their opponent is Hillary Clinton, the crooked Clintons, the criminal cartel there. On the other hand, Hillary violated the Espionage Act, exposed our secrets to all our enemies, lied to the FBI, lied to the Congress, lied to the American people, lied to the mother of a fallen hero in Benghazi over his coffin. Not one Democrat said this is a bridge too far. Not one. And that's because they think of themselves as the army of the saints redeeming the world, and we are the party of the devil. And until Republicans fight fire with fire and answer that back, it's going to be really an uphill battle. Here's why I think we've come to this. This is not a development of this year. The personality of Trump, the snobbery of the Washington elites, that's certainly an element. But this is a chasm that's been developing in our national life for 20 and 30 years. And the reason that it's such an irreconcilable conflict coming from the left is because the left, progressives, the Democratic Party as a whole, is committed to a creed, an ideology, a worldview, which is anti-American. It's called identity politics. Identity politics. Identity politics is when you judge people by their origins, their skin color, their gender, their class, their sexual orientation, a lot of things that people can't change. The American way, the American idea, beginning at the Declaration with our birth certificate, the Declaration of Independence, is that we are a nation of individuals, and that regardless of our origins, we are judged and held accountable as individuals for what we do and who we are. And that's because America was founded and could only have been founded, and I say this as a Jew, by Protestants. The Protestant Reformation, the idea behind it was that a human institution, what they regarded, what the Protestant reformers regarded as a human institution, which was the church at that time, cannot stand in for God, that individuals have a direct relationship with their Creator. And if you look at the Declaration of Independence, it is, we are all endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights, and we are regarded as equal. And the government, which is a human institution, can't give us or take away these inalienable rights. We are to be judged as individuals, regardless of our origins. The politically correct, if you like, political correctness to me is the party line word for this ideology is people of color. That's the term that organizes everything. People of color are people who are oppressed. And the Democratic Party, in its platform, talks about the systemic racism in America. This is as mythical as the global warming, but more mythical because it's right in front of you. You don't have to be a climatologist to understand it. Systemic racism. People go around talking about America as a white supremacist nation. These people belong in mental institutions. What are they talking about? I don't have to go into why that is such hooey. But people of color. Well, think of the phrase. It's an ideological term. It's not English. We don't say, here's a box of crayons of color. That's the way French people talk, du couleur. Of course, you can't say colored people because that's racist. They're so good. They're very good at politics. Everything else, I mean, they're hopeless. But, okay, so what is the ideological function of people of color? Well, consider Mexico. Two main ethnic groups. The descendants of the Spanish conquistadors who oppressed and slaughtered the indigenous Indians, and the descendants of the survivors of the indigenous Indians, who were oppressed by the other group. But when these two groups cross the border, they're both people of color, therefore oppressed. Therefore, all these sensitivities we have to have. We can't hold them accountable for their actions. We have to give them special privileges. Maharajas in India are people of color. The beheaders and crucifiers and killers of children in the Islamic murderers in Syria and Iraq, they're all people of color. And if you wondered why the Democratic Party is so soft on our Islamic enemies, we can't even call them Islamic enemies, it's because they're all people of color. And who's not people of color? Who's the oppressor of all these people of color? White people. So the Democratic Party is driven by a racist ideology. It's a racist party. And that makes it very, very difficult to work together because they're going to find whatever you do, they'll get the gotcha and they'll damn you as a white person or insensitive to some blooming idiot like Maxine Waters. The last two books to receive the National Book Award were written by black racists, Ta-Nehisi Coates, and this guy's name is Ibram Kendi. It's called Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racism in America. I can tell you as an author, you don't get to call your own book The Definitive History. It's semi-literate, and it's just pure racism. It's tragic what's happened to our culture. Our universities are gone and our K-12 schools. It's terrible. So I wrote a chapter of this book, Big Agenda, called The Achilles Heel of the Democratic Party. And it's my lesson for conservatives in how to fight. The Achilles heel of the Democratic Party is that the Democratic Party has a stranglehold on every inner city in America of any size. Every killing field, Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, St. Louis, Ferguson, Baltimore, all 100% controlled by the Democratic Party. They probably all have black police chiefs anyway. All 100% controlled by the Democratic Party and have been for 50 to 100 years. Everything that's wrong in the inner cities, every injustice, every oppression, Democrats are 100% responsible for. But Republicans are too polite to mention this. All those kids in the failing schools, that every year, 40% of the kids don't graduate, 40% of those who do are functionally illiterate and will never get a shot at the American dream. 100% controlled by the Democratic Party, and Republicans too polite to mention it. Now, Donald Trump has said he's going to do a New Deal for Black America. And if he does that, and I believe he will just blow up the Democratic base in urban America. So all of you need to press your Republican colleagues and congressmen and representatives to push that agenda, particularly vouchers. They should voucherize the entire school system. Why are we sending... Why are we sending money to these bureaucracies? Why, give it to the parents and let them find a school that will teach their kids. I can't get over how bad things are. I mean, we survived Obama is amazing to me. And if you look at the Susan Rice, I mean, she lied to cover up their crimes in Benghazi, and was promoted to National Security Advisor. That tells you what a lowlife Barack Obama is. So she paid him off by what? By taking America's intelligence community, its national security apparatus, and using it as opposition research on the Republican Party. That's the end of democracy if they succeeded at that. That's how determined and that's because of this mentality. We are redeeming the world, so suppressing the opposition, that's virtuous. That's virtuous. I had a little influence on what's happening because Steve Miller is a protege of mine, somebody I've worked with since he was at Santa Monica High School, and who had the poor judgment, I guess, to host me as a speaker at Duke University when he was there. So after alienating his entire faculty at Santa Monica High, did the same thing at Duke. And I was recommended him to Sessions, whom I knew. But, and I bring this up because Steve was the chief speechwriter for Trump. And the speech he gave at the inauguration, which it was criticized because he talked about the carnage in the inner city. I mean, the Democrats, they're brilliant. I mean, they're so shameless. They attack Republicans as racist for finally recognizing or saying that things are pretty horrible in the inner cities. They're war zones. I mean, it's just terrible. But in this inaugural address, Trump presented an answer to this view of the world that we're driven by identity politics and have to be identified by race, by color, by gender, and all these things. And if you'll remember, what he said was this. He said, if we love our country, we can learn to love, if we are loyal to our country, that's what it was. If we are loyal to our country, we can learn to be loyal to each other. Very profound. If we have patriotism in our hearts, there will be no room for prejudice. We are black and white and brown, but we all bleed patriot red. That is the American idea. That's what the Democratic Party is at war with, and why we have to be at war with them. Thank you.
That was a great ending. So we're going to do a Q&A now. We just ask that you raise your hand and wait for someone to bring a microphone to you, as we are live streaming this, and the only way for the people at home to hear your question is if we get a microphone to you. So, oh, Aaron's coming somewhere else. Go right here.
David, you're very inspiring in these dark times. I'm going back to this, I think it was the first Democratic convention, and our own Mayor Villaraigosa had to reintroduce, and I might have messed this up, the idea that the recognition of Israel. Do you remember that when they took 3 voice counts? They were all booed down by the Democratic convention, and he looked like a deer in the headlights, and he kept turning around, and after 3 times, she just said, the lady behind him said, just pass it, just pass it. Do you remember that at all?
I didn't watch it, but I remember the incident, yeah.
I don't know why more hasn't been made of that event. It was the most embarrassing thing I'd ever seen in my life. Anyway, okay.
We're going to go, I think, to you right here.
Thank you, David. Very well received on my part, your dissertation. One of the things I learned early on in my life was when a bully is being a bully, you hit him as hard as you can in the mouth as fast as you can. That's one of my laws, is when I find a bully, I hit him hard. What in your book can we take away to hit that bully back?
Yeah, my book, actually, I picked this up from a Democratic strategist named Chris Lahane. It was a quote, I didn't meet him, but in an article about him in the New York Times. But then I found out he stole it from Mike Tyson. And the quote was this: everybody has a game plan until you punch them in the mouth. And if you, my book, Big Agenda, I discuss this, that the Democrats have this, they have the punch in the mouth. You're a racist, you're a sexist, you're a homo. And Republicans have no punch in the mouth. I am waiting for the Republican to look Debbie Wasserman Schultz in the eye and said, how can you belong to such a racist party as your party? And we did get that from Trump. I mean, this is why I've been an enthusiast of Donald Trump. In the debates, he looked Hillary Clinton in the eye and said, you are a liar and a crook. Which she is both. But you can't name me one other Republican who would have done that on national TV. And that's why, I worry about Donald Trump, his health and his safety. And I worry about all the forces in Washington that can corrupt even the best. So, this lady does it. Sorry.
Sorry, there's over here.
It's my estimation that so many of the problems that we have in this country stem from the stalling out of our manufacturing. And that the reason for that is free trade agreements that have one basis, but a tax system that we have that is the opposite of all the rest of the world. The rest of the world has the VAT. They tax consumption. In this country, we have tax after tax after tax on production. And so there's this horrible or imbalance. I don't feel like the Republicans, well, in your book, you're saying, okay, Mr. President Trump is going to have this agenda and he's going to fix these things. I don't know that the Republican Party is ready to follow him.
Well, I think the Republican Party is the big problem, no question. I mean, and these are, and Paul Ryan is not a young man. He's a very bright man. I don't think he has a political brain cell. But he's a terrific wonk, very impressive that way. But can Trump change him? Well, first of all, let me just say, one of the things I think that drives this administration is that the two strategists, Bannon and Steve Miller, are both second thoughters, as is Trump himself. And that means they bring that passion, the missionary passion of the left, into the anti-left cause. That's very good. I don't know what they're going to do with tax policy, whether they'll do a VAT tax or how they'll correct that. I think he's beginning by cutting the corporate tax to, if he does it to 15%, that would be great. It's a big battle. And you talk about their globalism. This is part of their redeeming the world. Of course, we shouldn't have borders. We're all one happy human race. I'll never forget. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Henry Kissinger, but I do remember him say, he said, the normal condition of humankind is war. Beginning with Cain and Abel. I don't think he said that, but beginning with Cain and Abel is war. All the time. There's always 40 or 50 wars going on. People are at each other's throats. Peace is abnormal. And what creates peace is a coalition of powers or a superpower that can intimidate would-be aggressors. That's the real world. When Hillary Clinton says her dream is for no borders, it's lunatic. Unfortunately, there's not much we can do about it now. We don't have, the left has ended the exchange, the dialogue. I can't tell you how terrible our universities are, how absolutely awful. I've just spent a good part of today talking to the vice chancellor for student affairs at Berkeley. I've been invited to speak at Berkeley. So he got on the phone with me first yesterday. This is where I laid down the law to him. And they've jerked these college Republicans who invited me around, and they told them, sure, Horowitz can come and speak, but he has to speak 10 blocks off campus. Wait, it gets better. He has to speak at 1 o'clock in the afternoon when everybody is in class. And you can't advertise the location of the speech. So I told them, which is true, I said, look, I've got a donor to my organization who has been working for years. You would know his name if I give it to you. To give for a gift, I've tried to dissuade him from this, but failed, to Berkeley, to the University of California, Berkeley, of $1 billion. But after the Milo Yiannopoulos fiasco, he said, I'm withdrawing the gift. So I told him, first of all, he needs to lower the pay of his of the campus police chief, because he wants the Republican kids to do his job by I mean, the violence is being threatened by the left. They want the Republican kids to just, go in a hole and not be there. That's how they're going to solve the violence. I said the way you do it is this. You and I know, I can give you the list of the leftist groups that are going to be violent, but you already know it. And it's going to be Students for Justice in Palestine, Antifa, which is a fascist organization called anti-fascist. You just call the heads of them in before this event. You tell them if one member of their group is found to be a violent protest, you're going to throw the whole group off campus, and that'll solve it.
Thank you very much for Stephen Miller.
I didn't
Whatever you
produce it.
did.
You could thank his parents, his liberal parents. Such a bright young man.
We can look back and see all of the problems that have been created by the Democrats and how they're so adept at the politics of it all and what they did to Richard Nixon. But what can we expect? What should we be doing now with regard to Susan Rice going forward to use those techniques back at them?
Well, I have the fight fire with fire is a theme that goes through this book, Big Agenda, and you have to hold them accountable. They have controlled every inner city in America for 50 to 100 years. If Republicans had, what do you think they would? You just think about the way the Democrats would attack Republicans, and just attack them back. It was a movie we all sort of loved in our youth. What was it? The Wild One with Marlon Brando? Or maybe it was On the Waterfront. Do it to him before he does it to you. Really simple. They're not prepared for this, believe me. I actually, Jim Rogan was a friend of mine when he was in the Congress. Now he's a judge, I think in Orange County. But Rogan picked up this strategy when he was on the Judiciary Committee, and he attacked Conyers. Oh, God, a moron. He said, it was over gun control. He said, you guys, you live in gated communities, you got Secret Service, you got all this protection. He said, a welfare mother in a high crime area, her security is what she can reach for in the night table drawer. And Conyers was spluttering, he didn't know what to say, but it just blows them up. And that's the way to do it. I always tell Republicans, study the way the Democrats attack and turn the guns on them. It's really simple. But don't become them.
I'd like you to speak a little bit about the seemingly drumbeat today that the left has come out with about social justice.
Social justice, I had a book in my parents' communist library called The Cry for Social Justice. It's communism, socialism, it's the same thing. What it is, Hayek, who had a huge influence on my intellectual transformation, he wrote a book called The Mirage of Social Justice. And he pointed out that there is no entity, society. So society isn't redistributing wealth. Society isn't picking winners and losers. It's a political party. So all social justice is a justification for leftists to reward their friends and punish their enemies, period. They have this idea that people are like blank slates and that, why are our prisons filled with blacks? Because they commit so many crimes. If you watched the Sessions hearings, Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut brought up this quote of mine. I said, why? As an example of why Jeff Sessions is a racist for taking an award from my organization. It's simple. And the 95% of their victims are black. So all of this prison reform baloney. All the things that Obama did with his that corrupt Justice Department was to enable black criminals in the inner city to kill other blacks. Why? I mean, Dwayne Wade's cousin, this beautiful mother of 4 children, was murdered by 2 felons who shouldn't have been on the streets. But the Democrats have a catch and release policy. Because if a black person commits a crime, white people are responsible because of the oppressive systemic racism. This book by Ta-Nehisi Coates, who's the son of a Black Panther and is the most pampered racist in America, just a star player on the left. His book is motivated, the story that motivates, where all his passion comes from, is that his friend, who was black, was killed by a policeman in Montgomery County, Maryland. The policeman said that this young man was trying to run him over with a car. The policeman was black. So how does Ta-Nehisi Coates deal with this? He accuses him of thinking white.
We're going way back there.
It came out recently in Fox News that at a high school just 30 minutes away from here, a teacher was reported to have said something that, if taken seriously by the Secret Service, could be actionable from a law enforcement perspective. I won't repeat it here. I agree that vouchers are a solution to a lot of the problems plaguing our schools. But that's a long ball strategy. What can concerned parents do right now, between now and December of next year, to solve this problem, or at least try, sir?
Well, I don't know. Look, I've devised what I call a code of ethics for K-12 teachers, because I think the rot begins at kindergarten. And basically, it would say a teacher cannot advocate on any side of a controversial issue. And the controversial issue is defined as an issue that's a point in a Democratic or Republican Party platform, national or at the state level or at the local level. I'm trying to find a way to get that adopted, where the teacher would be suspended and then lose their license if they did it.
I'm sort of a follow-up onto your last answer. A person asked, what can we do to solve the educational problem in the next 12 months or 9 months? I think it's a much longer term problem than that, and it's one that I think is perhaps the most basic one that we're facing. We're losing control, or have lost control, of our young people.
No, they don't know anything.
And so my question...
They just don't know anything. If I hear this, they're taught that the Constitution was, by slave owners.
Sure.
They've taught it out of a communist book called The People's History of the United States. I understand
Exactly.
that.
But they've been working on this for years.
The way the immediate fight has to begin, and I'm waiting for this to happen, there are 500 sanctuary cities and counties. The officials in every one of those cities and counties need to be prosecuted and put in jail. They need to go after the Clintons. They need to go to jail. They need to put, I could go on and on. It needs to get rough. And I can't tell you. That's such a big step. You know, we haven't prosecuted anybody for treason since Tokyo rose. Not the Rosenbergs, not Aldrich Ames. Nobody. Nobody. And that's the problem.
Thank you for coming tonight, Mr. Horowitz. And I'm just curious, what do you know or think about Saul Alinsky? It seems like...
There's another section of my book.
Okay. All right.
Okay, Saul Alinsky, he said this. When I was a radical, we despised Saul Alinsky. He was smarter than we were. We despised him because we were saying, but what do we want a revolution and we want it now, burn the MFR down. This is a stick up, the sky's the limit. That's the way we talked. And Alinsky said, yes, the system does need to be burned down. He was a communist. He wasn't a party member, but he was a communist who was. Do you know the Alinsky story? His mentor was Frank Nitti, the enforcer for the Capone gang. This is true. He was a sociology student in Chicago, and he came under his apprenticeship. But anyway, Alinsky said, when you say things like that, when you telegraph your agenda that you want to overthrow the system, people turn off on you. What you have to do, you have to join the Democratic Party. We call this boring from within, and we meant it in both senses. We despised it. It was boring, but it was very smart. And that's why the Democratic Party today is indistinguishable from me in its views from my communist parents. I don't see the difference. It's a very radical, very anti-American party. And I'm waiting for more people to say that.
My name's Jack, and I'm from San Diego, and it was worth the 3.5-hour drive to get here.
Oh, thank you.
My mom doesn't like me talking about family, but I need your help. I've got Republicans above me. There's 8 of us in the family, and I'm the conservative. I'm the youngest one of the boys. But I've got 2 sisters who are Hollywood liberals. How do I deal with them?
Just be nice to them. My mother stopped speaking to my uncle, our brother, for a year once because he was a Trotskyite. And then she came to the conclusion that family is more important than politics. I think that's wise advice.
I was raised in the Deep South, and in my family, there's 3 of us. My husband is the political nerd and has always been. He's the Republican. My daughter is the Democrat, and I've always stayed as a registered independent. It gets exciting at my house. But this has been a really fast curve for me because I wasn't political at all until this past year. And I have had such a difficult time dealing with people. I had to go look up the definition of misogynist. I didn't think I could become one, but people have called me that, and I said, what? The only thing I can do is on Facebook, every stupid thing that I read, I go and I fact check it, and then I post and say, okay, well, this is what really happened, or what have you. What else can we do? I mean, there's so many of us that want to do something. I mean, I hate living in California that's now a sanctuary state. I mean, this is terrible.
Well, that's a big battle here.
What do we do?
They've done a poll. Here's a political problem for Republicans if the Republican Party in California existed. 75% or something like that, 74% of Californians are against sanctuary cities. 65% of Democrats. Hispanics don't like sanctuary cities. They're afraid of criminals. It's very reasonable. I mean, nobody talks about the diseases that are coming in because nobody's screened. But that's a big problem too, not to mention bankrupting all of the facilities that we have. So there are battles all around you. You can get involved in them. And I wish there was a Republican Party in this state. I really do. But
Hi, my name's Nick Riddell, and I go to Newbury Park High School. I was just wondering what advice you give to a young person going into Republican politics, especially in today's age.
Advice? I don't know. Look, you're young. In my view, I mean, I was very opinionated from the time I was like 10 years old. I don't think that's a good thing. I think it's good to keep an open mind and be very curious, and not get too committed to battles when you're in school. Young people don't realize what an enormous privilege you have. You have time on your hands. You don't have obligations. You don't have children to support. You don't, and so forth and so on. So use your mind and be inquisitive. And there'll come a day when you'll know what you believe and you can fight for it. But don't get too embattled. I know that sounds counter to everything I said, but I think we have to respect youth.
We're going in the back.
Could you talk a little bit about white privilege and what that is?
It's just a big stick to beat white people with. The only skin privilege in this country is black skin privilege. If you're black, you go to the head of the line to get into a college, you go to the head of the line to get a job, you go to the head of the line to get a promotion, you go to the head of the line to be on a board or represent. And this is, I've written a pamphlet called Black Skin Privilege, very destructive to blacks. You're not tested. You get this pass. It's like, very pretty people have this problem too. A lot of things come to them very easily. You'll notice that Napoleon was very short. He had to compensate. I can't remember if it was Shelby Steele or Tom Sowell who said, nobody gets to, jump higher by lowering the bar. This is a terrible thing that liberals, progressives, and that's another term that's idiotic, since they're reactionaries, have done to all minorities, but in particular to black people. These affirmative action programs, what they do is they make the progressives feel really good. Thomas Sowell once wrote an article on this. He said that the black students at MIT are recruited from the top, I think it was 1% of all high school graduates, but they're in the bottom 10% at MIT because it's an extraordinary school, and probably the people at the top are Asians. The idea that everybody has the same talents and the same skills and the same brain power is, it's part of this religion of the left. And it's just very destructive. So I don't know what white skin privilege is, since whites are the targets. So if you know Tom Sowell has written so many good books on this, but people who have money, the millionaires in this country, there's not all of them, but a huge percentage are self-made. And if you have a lot of money, the people who fall out of the upper class and going down are also, there's a lot of mobility. So the idea of privilege is, except when the government privileges you, there's the privilege of, if you're a drug addict, I'm speaking from things I know, but if you're a drug addict and a semi-criminal, the government will give you Section 8 housing and lots of money and EBT cards and whatnot, and make it easy for you to. That's privilege.
So we have time just for 2 more questions. We're going to go right there, and then we're going to go right here.
If somebody uses white privilege and throws it in your face, they're probably a racist. When I hear that term, there's a racist there.
Mr. Horowitz, thank you. As we look back the last couple of months at Trump and him driving forward his agenda, as you reflect back, and if you were to advise him, what would you say he'd do differently to, one, get more of the Freedom Caucus on board, and two, get more of his agenda done?
The healthcare thing, I don't know if anybody understands the health. I hear the people talking on, on the talking head shows. Healthcare, it's so complicated. And Obama had, what did he have, 7 years to screw up the entire healthcare system. So, those are complicated questions. To me, the mistake was, why do it in 2 weeks? They can do it. It'll be done. If I had advice to Trump, the first thing I would say out of the box is pick 3 more manageable inner cities. Inner city is a huge problem, and start that New Deal. And that will politically, it will throw the opposition side into a tizzy, and they won't know what to do with it. And it will, give you some protection. That would have been my advice. But these are very, they're complicated. I think he's doing a great job. I mean, he's just cut all those regulations. He's serious about ISIS. He's serious about borders. All of that is to the good. And I'm waiting for the prosecutions. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess I'm last. Save the best for last. Thank you, Mr. Horowitz, for all your work. I've read just about everything, except I haven't had the white privilege to read your new book yet. And I don't know if this is in it, but I want to know, besides fighting the Democrats, how do you fight the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, and the Bilderbergers? How do you do that?
Well, it's all the same fight. I wouldn't, does Trilateral Commission still exist? It does. Look, there are many interests in a global, one world solution, if you will. It's interesting. If you're running a multinational corporation, you really don't have a lot of patriotic roots and loyalty. It's just the nature of the business. So it's a political question, and I think we have a movement now in Europe and in the United States to restore the integrity of the nation state. And I once read a book by Roger Scruton. I think it's called The West and the Rest. He's a very overly brilliant English conservative philosopher. What he pointed out was how the rights we have are very specific. The American nation is unique. As I say, it was founded by Protestant dissenters, and it has this particular characteristic in its traditions and its outlook and its founding documents that come from a long history, going back to the Magna Carta, actually. And so we can't just open our borders. That was a problem even before they were as open as they are now under Obama. It started with Teddy Kennedy. Huge problems. I don't worry about the Bilderbergers and because I worry about our political leadership. I worry about the Republican Party and what it sees. And if you fight that battle, the nation state is very powerful, and those people would be defeated. But if we don't, and I don't know. I close. My talks are always full of this kind of pessimism, I guess. And this is a problem with conservatives. Conservatives are realists, so they always expect the worst. And that leads to a kind of fatalism. And I always think of this one fact, that in April 1941, the Nazis had overrun all of Europe except England was still holding out. The Japanese were all over Manchuria and the South Pacific. And Gallup took a poll. Should the United States get involved in the war? It's April 1941. 80% of Americans said no. And then came Pearl Harbor, and we finished them off in 4 years. Thank you.